Welcome everyone. This is Commerce to the Text, eCommerce and Drupal reinvented. Today we'll be looking at the new version of Drupal Commerce that we've built on Drupal 8. My name is Bojan Živanović and I'm Bojan on Drupal.org. I'm the lead developer of Drupal Commerce to the Text. And I'm also a long-time Drupal contributor, having worked on many modules such as views bulk operations, design entity form, and others. I work for a company called Commerce Guys. We are a small team based primarily in the US nowadays, and our primary reason of existence is basically to solve the hardest parts of e-commerce, primarily through our work on Drupal Commerce. Many years ago, we realized that if you wanted to create a truly successful e-commerce system, you needed to have strong CMS capabilities. You can build the best e-commerce features, but if your client cannot add content and manage content, you will simply lose, because clients nowadays expect this blend of content and e-commerce. So we realized that we really needed a strong CMS, and luckily, Drupal is one of them, which is how we got started and how we started Drupal Commerce. Give me a second to try and move myself out of the way of the projector. Oh, crap. Yeah. Okay, sorry for the interruption. We released Drupal Commerce 1.x in, I guess it was DrupalCon London, so that was August 2011. And since then, over the previous 5 years, we have reached over 60,000 live installations, which is a current record for e-commerce on Drupal in general. However, once Drupal 8 came out, we realized, of course, that it was a complete game changer and that we needed to start from scratch. The big reason why eCommerce 1.x was successful was because it was a native solution built from scratch on Drupal 7. If you knew Drupal, then you already knew Drupal Commerce. There were no surprises. To repeat the same success, we needed to start from scratch on Drupal 8 as well. And once we started doing that, we started looking at the mistakes we made previously. We realized that when we released the first version of Drupal Commerce, it took us too long to achieve the desired UX. You needed to use separate screens for creating products. It was all a bit of a mess. And over the next 6 months, by early 2012, we fixed that. But by then there was already this story of commerce being difficult to use. So we realized that this time around we really needed to ship with good UX from the very beginning. And we did that basically by integrating inline entity form and paying more attention to how our listings were designed. We also realized that developers did not have enough direction. There are common use cases that happen pretty much on every e-commerce project, and people got stuck reinventing the same things over and over again. We realized that in order to help people, we needed to document those use cases, document solutions, and then constantly follow these problems and see what we can solve in commerce itself. And then finally we realized that there were many features that each e-commerce site needed to have which we did not ship with. So to have reasonable checkout UX, we needed to install 5 contrib modules. Those contrib modules obviously belonged in commerce itself. Or to be able to allow your clients to create discounts, you needed to install an extra module. We realized that belonged in commerce as well. So we reevaluated our feature set and decided to broaden it simply to make life easier for people building e-commerce websites on Drupal. So, as I said, we started from scratch, and here we are now. Our last alpha release was released in May, and we'll release another alpha release somewhere around this camp, I'm guessing Monday or Tuesday, and that will be the last alpha release of Drupal Commerce to the Text. By Drupal Camp Dublin, which will happen at the end of September, we'll have a beta release which will be production ready, which means an upgrade path. Today, you can start building sites on Drupal Commerce. You can do your discovery, you can start your development, and then in a few weeks' time, you will do the final reinstallation, losing whatever demo content you had, and you can, from that point on, you can go live. The point being, you can develop today, and very soon will be completely ready. The reason why it took us a bit longer to come to this point is simply because we've extended our scope a lot and replaced the need for over 15 contrib modules, but of course rolling all of that functionality into Commerce had its price. So we require Drupal 8.1, and that's our base. We ourselves contributed a lot to the APIs to simply decrease the size of Commerce and make the APIs good enough for all of contrib. And we keep improving it. We keep adding to core, which means we always require the latest feature branch. When Drupal 8.2 is out, we will require 8.2 as well. We always follow the latest Drupal 8 release. We realize that there are many problems that we solve inside Commerce that are not Drupal specific at all. The way we calculate taxes or validate addresses or format currencies. So we created separate libraries that contain this functionality. And by doing that, we got more attention for Commerce itself, and we got more people to help us out on what are the most boring problems, the problems that require data for each country, and we simply got more stability out of it, because Commerce is now becoming production ready, but for the past year, people have been using these libraries in production, so I've received bug reports about zip codes in Peru not being precise enough, some Chinese provinces not being translated the right way. We also have a SaaS solution called FoxyCart using our tax library, and they've been keeping our tax definitions up to date and addressing edge cases such as there's a US company registered to collect VAT in Europe and so on. So we got stability and we got many edge cases resolved this way. We then tied this in together by basically using Composer to download the libraries. The only way to download Commerce today is through Composer. In the next year, I'm guessing that pretty much every module will be installed only through Composer. That's the current reality of Drupal 8, and it's the reality of PHP, because nowadays you cannot install a PHP library without using Composer. Who here has used Composer? Well, pretty much everyone. Then I don't need to tell you much. It's basically PHP's drush that can recursively resolve dependencies, which is what makes it such an improvement over drush for Drupal 6 and 7, because it means you can tell it, give me Drupal Commerce, and then it will automatically download the modules that Commerce needs and the libraries that Commerce needs. And then when you do Commerce update Drupal Commerce, it will also update all of those modules and all of those libraries. So it presents a really easy way of managing a site. If you're starting from scratch, we have a whole project that you can use in Composer Create project. It will give you a Drupal core and Commerce, everything ready to install and use. And we even override the installer slightly so that it enables Commerce by default. It's a very easy way to get started. Some people do complain that requiring users to use the command line is a bad idea. One of our contributors started actually work on a Composer UI so that all of this can be done by clicking instead. And I think that's a great solution, but UI or not, Composer is here to stay, and it's the way to efficiently manage a Drupal 8 website with all of its dependencies. We also rely on the inline entity form module that we use to create product variations on the product and line items on the order, and simply any case where our data model is composed out of multiple entities. This is a module we've developed, and it's one of the most popular Drupal modules now in general. We use the profile module for customer profiles, which store the addresses and phone numbers of your customers. In Commerce 1.x we used our own entity type, but now there's no need to do that. And we've joined forces with the Profile 2 folks and renamed it into Profile for a solution that the entire community can use, and which we can eventually add into Drupal core as well. We use state machine for our workflows, and you might have heard that Drupal core is getting workflows as well. The approach is similar. We basically create the states that an order or a payment can have in a YAML file, and then based on that define the transitions that it can have. I'll go into detail more about this later. And finally, we have the address module, which solves the complexities of storing addresses and formatting them in a country-specific way. You can see an example here of an address form shown for the United States. The trick here is that each country has its own address format, and that address format defines which fields are used, in which order, how they're grouped, what's in one line, what isn't, which are required, how they're validated, and how they're labeled. Some countries have a state, some call it a province. Some have a city, some have an island. Some have a zip code, some have a postal code. So there are many different ways to generate an address form, and if you do not do it the right way, the customer usually gets annoyed. Reading studies about checkout abandonment, you can see that I was not from the US, but they still required me to enter something as the state is listed as a high cause of annoyance. So we ship with address formats for over 200 countries, thanks to our addressing library that includes data that Google built for Android and that we extended with Drupal data and contributed back to them. We also have a UI for editing that, and then we have the matching widgets and formatters. We also have support for zones, which are very useful for shipping and tax purposes, and they are a way of describing a geographical grouping. So you can create a zone called the European Union, and then you can see whether an address belongs to that zone and use that when determining which shipping rates to use, which taxes to charge, or whether to allow sign up from a user, and many other things. So think of it as a UI that you can use from a rule or code. It's useful because, for example, in Europe, taxes collected do not match the actual country territory. So, for example, German VAT is also collected in parts of Austria, and Austrian VAT is not collected in those parts. There are many examples like that on the borders where you have these special areas. So to be able to handle them nicely, we actually use zone definitions to figure out where a specific tax type is used. And going into Drupal Commerce itself, we started by improving the way currencies are displayed and used. With Commerce 1.x, we had this static list of currencies, but we realized that these currencies change all the time because new countries start getting used, previous currencies get deprecated, some lose their minor units thanks to inflation. So we realized we needed to have a list that's always up to date. And we found that in the CLDR project, which is a JSON repository maintained by Apple and Google and others, which gives us a list of currencies, and it gives us translations for well, I think about 200 languages, but let's say all of the major languages. So that means we have a currency list translated into all languages by default. If you select Finnish as your language, we'll automatically import the names of all currencies in Finnish, which is really nice if you have that kind of screen like Booking.com has, where the user can select from any currency. We also have translated currency symbols into all of those languages because we realized that the symbol is actually translation specific in many cases as well. For example, if you're showing the US dollar in a country that has its own dollar, then you need to prefix the dollar symbol with the US words. We also realized that price formatting is not just tied to a specific currency, because the same currency amount can be shown differently in different countries. So you can see an example of a euro amount in France, in Germany, and in the UK. Turns out number formatting is locale specific, so it's specific to a language in a specific country. And that defines whether the currency symbol goes before or after, whether you're using a comma to divide the decimals or the thousands and so on. We also found this data in the CLDR dataset, and it allows us to create a number formatter that works the way you expect it to. We even support non-Arabic numbers. You can see an example on the right. And we support entering prices in the current locale. So most European countries require you to separate decimals with a comma, but computing requires a dot. So in that case, we often had clients in France who would try to enter a price using a comma and fail. Now we understand the number format and we can use that to parse it and store the number correctly while accepting the correct input and providing the correct output. We completely redesigned our tag system to allow tax changes on specific dates. If you know that Finland is going to raise its VAT on January 1st, you probably do not want to spend your New Year's Eve with your finger on the submit button so that you can change the tax rate at midnight and charge the correct prices on January 1st. Instead, you want the system to do that for you, so now you can specify the percentages with start and end dates. We also have predefined tax rates for most of Europe, and we are constantly expanding that list. Outside of Europe, we also now have Canada and Australia, and as people are contributing, we're getting more and more. The idea is that when you install commerce, you tell us from which country you're going to sell, and based on that, we import the right currency and the right tax types and tax rates, and then we keep that up to date for you. We also have special logic that takes into account what you're selling, because taxation is done differently in Europe based on whether you're selling digital or physical products. If you're selling digital, then you always need to charge the tax rate of the customer. So if you're selling from Finland to a German customer, you need to charge German VAT. And so we have the logic that accounts for that, accounts for B2B or B2C, and ties all of that together. We, of course, for sales tax in the US, that's a lost cause, so the best we can do is to integrate with Avalara and use that for that. We added support for multiple stores in the same website, and there are two use cases here that you have. The first one is a company that has multiple different branches in different countries and bills from them. So for example, Commerce Guys used to be the same company as Platform.sh. If you wanted to register and pay for the Platform.sh hosting, we would charge you from our French office if you registered from Europe, but if you registered from North America, we would charge you from our US office. That's what stores allow you. They allow you to represent those billing locations, and based on that, charge different taxes, issue different invoices, or even specify different discounts, use different currencies, and so on. We also support, the other big use case is the use case of Etsy, where you allow people to register and create their own stores. And then each store sells separate products that are then taxed and sold separately. We also support that through our data model, and we then allow people to build these kinds of UIs and do that as well. Of course, since the tax depends on the store, we must limit orders to only one store. You see this on Etsy as well, because if you buy from multiple Etsy vendors, you actually get multiple carts and multiple checkouts. And that's what our system now supports out of the box. It's one of the things we realized into the text. It's better to design for many and then reduce to one, if that's the majority use case, than to design only for one and have a problem in trying to scale to multiple. So even if you don't benefit from multiple stores, the fact that it's there will help you on some client sites. We integrate with Drupal console, which is the Drupal 8 successor to Drush. You can see here that we have this initial setup command that creates a store for you, and based on that automatically imports the currency for you and imports the tax types. We will support more as time comes. We reworked the way we do products. If you've used Commerce Kickstart, then it's kind of how it works in Core as well. So basically products are made out of product variations. Each product has one or more variations. If you're selling t-shirts and you have one t-shirt in multiple colors and multiple sizes, then color and size are product attributes. And each combination of a color and a size is a product variation. It has its own SKU and its own price. That allows you to track how many of a specific t-shirt you've sold and how many you have left. So when you create a product, you can create these variations right there using inline entity form, and you can select which attributes values it has. We also generate the variation URL for you and have all kinds of nice improvements over one-to-text, including full translatability support. It was very hard to create a multilingual website with Drupal 7 because of Drupal 7 limitations, but that's now gone with Drupal 8. We've built a completely custom UI for product attributes, where you can now create multiple attribute values on the same screen. Previously, we forced you to use taxonomy, which has a really confusing UI that merchants did not like because you had one screen per color being added. So in this case, we allow you to do it on the same screen and translate it. We also allow you to select which variations you're using per variation type, and then fields for that get created. We reworked the way we do orders, so you can now have multiple order types that each have their own workflows and their own checkout flows. That makes sense if you're selling different kinds of products. So for example, you're selling books and you're selling downloadables and you're selling events. Each of these probably has a different checkout experience, a different way, maybe the different way the users are paying, different things that needs to happen after the order has been placed. And we now support all of this at the same time. We use it on a client side to implement different flows for B2B and B2C, for example. We've added many improvements, such as a better UI for placing orders on the admin side, additional timestamps, and other details. You can see an example of the new order edit screen here, where we have the workflow state in the top right corner, and then we are adding line items here. We now support multiple carts. If you have multiple stores, the user will get a cart per store. If you use multiple order types, you can also have a cart per order type. And this is one of the improvements. You can have a single cart, but if you need multiple, it's there for you. We also render the actual product in the first column to make it easier for themers. We've completely rebuilt the add to cart form, and so that it's actually a line item creation form, which for developers among you means that it's much easier to extend and much easier to change. It's no longer a 1,000-line monster. Instead, it fits into how Drupal itself is doing it. We, of course, support dynamic attribute selection, and we support injecting variation fields and theming them along with the product fields, even if you're using panels or display suite, which is another great improvement. You can see an example here of editing which fields are actually exposed on the add to cart form. So for example, if you've added a text field for accepting text that needs to be printed on a t-shirt or a mug, you can just add that field to the line item type and expose that field on the add to carts form, and it automatically works. No code needed to collect additional information when the user is adding something to the cart or purchasing something. We've redesigned our shopping cart block to resemble what modern sites nowadays are doing. So you have an icon in the header that when you click you get a drop down. It's a view you can style. It shows you an overview of what's in the cart as well as links to go to the cart or checkout. We've redone checkout, allowing you to have different checkout flows. That means for different order types you can have different checkout flows, or you can have different checkout flows for different user groups, or however else you decide to pick it. And checkout flows are basically plugins that serve as forms. You can create a completely custom one through code if you want to, or you can use our UI builder to select which panes are shown on which steps in which order. So we've improved the way checkout is configured, and we've allowed you to use pure code if you wanted to. In one.txt it was really hard to build a completely custom checkout form through code, but now it's easy, and it's much easier to implement a single page checkout or to have a purchase form right there on the product form, and so on. All of those edge cases are now much easier to implement. You can see an example here of the improved checkout UX. Previously, you needed a module to ask the user to log in or register. We now support that on the first screen. You can log in, you can continue as guest, or you can disable guest checkout, which replaces that button with a registration form. no modules needed. We also give you an indication on which step of checkout you are. It's not shown here, I will show it in the next picture. And we have an order summary on the right, which can be extended to allow editing the cart as well. All of this required several modules, and all of it is now integrated. We've done a lot of research in what checkout UX should be, and we are now implementing that more and more. And the biggest work we've done has been around payments. The payment API is several times bigger and integrates what was previously in the card and file module. It allows us basically to create a payment module in 1 day instead of 5 days, because it simply needs to do a lot less work. For gateways that support tokenization, which is they basically save the credit card details themselves and give you a secure token you can use without having to touch the payment details, we allow the same flow that you have on Amazon and other sites, where on step 1 you select the previous payment method or input a new one, so add your credit card number and everything. Then the JS fighters and Stripe or Braintree or PayPal or whoever give you the token. You save that, and on the next screen you already have a payment method saved with information that's safe to save. So that means your site is not touching the credit card information at all, but it looks completely native. At the same time, the user can actually edit the cards that are stored on their own user pages. They can see which cards they've used, they can reuse them, they can delete them. All of this was previously done by the card and file module. So that's a big change in functionality. And then the admin can create new payments using the payment methods that are previously stored. They can select a previous Visa, previous Discover card, whatever is there, and then add additional payments to the order. We also have custom UIs, UIs that are built in for capturing an authorization, for issuing a refund, all of which previously required modules to code all of that from scratch. And all of that has been merged recently and available. The first module we have is eCommerce Braintree, which is a PayPal API that supports all of this. This is our reference implementation. People are also working on Stripe and PayPal payment standard. If you want to work on authorize.net or others, you are free to start. I'm hoping that within the next month or two, we will have several more options. We are also adding a UI for discounts and coupons into core. It's currently still in a separate branch, so you need to install it by downloading it separately, but we plan to merge it by beta 1. And the idea is simply to allow merchants to create a discount and to define coupon codes and have that supported natively in Commerce. This was very tricky to get right in Commerce 1.x, and it took a long time for a contrib to mature, and now we want to launch with that present out of the box. You can see a very early screenshot here that just has the selection of the order type and the store the discount is limited to, as well as the usage limits and start and end dates. We also have, of course, the inline conditions, where you can select what the promotion applies to, actions such as percentage or fixed amount, and so on. The point is that this functionality will now be present as well. We do IRC meetings every Wednesday at 3 p.m. GMT +1, so that's 1 hour difference from this time zone. You can also look at the drupalcommerce.org website, where we have many blog posts about the work we've done and the work we're doing. And we have a completely new Git book at docs.drupalcommerce.org, where you're basically writing a book on commerce.x and making it freely available to basically improve the documentation. We all know the documentation of open source projects is terrible, but it doesn't mean it needs to be terrible. So by editing this Git book together, I'm hoping that we can arrive at truly great documentation. And what we already have up is probably more complete than what we had for 1.x. And I believe we have some time for questions. So let's start. Who has a comment on 1.x, 2.x, questions on functionality, contribute? Go.
I remember that Tim had Commerce 1, it was a bit of a hassle to create variations if you had a product with a lot of sizes and colors.
Yeah.
Has something been done in 2 to make bulk creation easier?
Well, there's nothing you can do other than implementing bulk creation. The way other software does this is either by giving you a bulk create wizard, which I think we should implement at some point, or by allowing you to basically import a CSV file that has all of them pre-generated. So what we can do is support both approaches. I'm hoping that the contributor will show up and implement the bulk generation. If not, I'm sure that within the next year it will come down to our to-do list as well. I'm actually pretty surprised no one ever implemented that for one.x.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I should note that we've started work on a new commerce shipping module that now supports different shipments and boxes, so better integration with remote APIs. The stock module is being written. It now has support for transactional stock, which is something that one.x lacked. And the commerce license architecture has been agreed on. So pretty much all the major contributors have started to be worked on. Yes?
How about integrations to some CRMs? Do you have anything else?
No. Traditionally, clients who wrote such integrations never shared them. I've never seen them open sourced. Probably because the integrations are tied to the client's data model. So I'm not really optimistic that that will happen. If you build any for your clients, I would very much like to see them, but so far, people who build them usually elect not to open source them. Yes?
Hi. Will there be any license commerce plugins in the core?
You mean commerce license?
Yeah, commerce license.
Well, it's not in core. It's still a separate contrib, but it's been a contrib that has worked well for us before, and we are pretty much ready to port it as it was into Drupal 8. So that means being able to ask money for access to nodes or user roles or a file. All of that can be ported pretty quickly, and now depends on client priorities mostly. If anyone's interested in working on a commerce license port, we can get started tomorrow at a sprint. Any last questions? Oh, if not, I'm here all day and tomorrow at the sprint, so feel free to find me and join me tomorrow if you want to work on documentation or tests or small issues. We have work of all checks. Thank you.